Let's see if we can take Hamish from Perth, Scotland. What the hell's that?
Yeah, there is a Perth, Scotland.
I'll be damned.
Apparently the royals hang out there a lot. And my computer just went away here. Come on,
well,
guys.
that's terrible. Luckily,
Yeah,
I've still got my list up.
Yeah.
As a reminder, after the show's over, we get together and go to dinner at, where are we going? Threadgills on?
Yeah, Threadgills, north.
Cool. They'll probably put the address up here in a second now that I've actually mentioned it. Hamish, you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Matthew. I'm here.
All right.
So what do you have for us?
I called in to discuss morality and the mind of God.
Morality and what?
The mind of God.
Okay.
I am a see. So, first I would like to ask you what you are to be morality, because I believe it would be useful for us to agree on our terms.
I think we already had this discussion.
Yeah,
earlier.
did you not hear the whole first 30 minutes of the show where we discussed the moral argument and I talked about how well-being was what I used as the foundation for morality?
And how I did not see that part, I'm sorry. But I will say, how do you define well-being?
So it's not well-defined because it's a rather robust concept, and it includes physical well-being and mental well-being and societal well-being. It's one of those things that you're constantly refining the definition of as you go along. And so you begin with simple things like life is generally preferable to death. Continuing living is generally preferable under well-being than dying would be. You can look at it as extinction being less preferable to thriving.
Therefore, would you conclude that it is merely based on human preference?
On human what?
Preference.
It is partially based on preference in the sense that we would like to continue living, that there's ultimately a subjective, I care about well-being. There's nothing you can say to make somebody care about well-being. It's not that well-being is necessarily an intrinsic good that is going to be universally identified. But among those people who would agree with a foundation of well-being, you can then begin to make non-subjective assessments about the consequences of actions.
Why does consensus matter to morality?
Did I say consensus?
Well, you said people should agree on well-being being
Sure.
the centre of morality.
Among the people who agree on well-being, well, if you don't have agreement on what you're talking about, then you can't talk about it. So, but generally speaking, well-being in some form or another has been what people have talked about with respect to morality for our entire history.
That is not true, because
It's
people
not?
talk about morality with regards to obeying the Ten Commandments and the Bible.
Sure, there are alternate things that people have pointed to as the foundation of morality, gods and stuff. But what we're really talking about, most of the time we talk about right and wrong, is what is in our best interest. And even when you look at the Ten Commandments, the reason those things were offered is because those people were convinced that that is what was in our best interest. It was in our best interest to obey God, to not have idols, to honor thy father and mother, to not steal, to not lie, etc. Ultimately, that comes down to what's in our best interest.
In any case, I would like to put forward that God's decision is ultimately the most effectful on our well-being. Hello?
What was that?
God is ultimately the greatest effector of our well-being.
What God?
The God of the Bible, the Lord.
Okay, so is the Bible an accurate portrayal of his character?
Absolutely.
So when he told people to slaughter the Midianites and everybody else, that was moral?
Indeed it was.
And when he said you could own slaves provided they didn't die within a couple days of beating them, that was moral?
That was specifically directed for the time, for the Jews. And
So
yes,
morality
that was
depends on the time? So something could be moral at one time and not moral at another time?
Yes.
That's
for
moral
example,
relativism, isn't it?
For
think it is.
example,
So are you saying, so morality, I'm assuming to you, is what is consistent with God's character, right?
allow me to just answer your first question first. So you said morality is relative under what I have proposed, and that is true because, for example, it might be wrong to kill someone in one context and then not wrong in another context.
Okay, so I understand. For example, in self-defense, we might not consider it wrong to kill somebody in the same way that we would consider it wrong to just run up and kill someone just because you feel like it. But you're talking about God as the foundation of morality. So when God says that it's okay to have slaves, you say that's moral. So that would mean that it's okay to have slaves, right?
If God said so, then yes.
Okay, so it's okay for us to have slaves.
That was back in the day.
No. When does God come out against slavery?
He need to.
He doesn't need to?
Well,
So we've got a book that you're saying represents God's character, and in that book, God permits the owning of slaves and never condemns it. So,
for example,
so the last word we have from your God is that slavery is okay, right?
The Lord cannot command us in the Bible to have laws regarding, for example, technology. Like,
well, I don't know why you're changing the subject. This is a simple question. In the Bible, in the Bible, God sanctions slavery and never condemns it. So is slavery moral or immoral?
It really depends.
It depends on what? You're
The exact context and situation.
No. God says you can have slaves, right? He didn't say you can have slaves in this particular context or situation. He said you can have slaves.
He told the ancient Hebrews that they could have slaves.
Okay. Did he ever tell anybody that they couldn't?
Did he ever tell anybody else that they could?
Oh, okay. So
wait
God said it's okay for Hebrews to own people as property. And you think that that's okay?
Chosen people.
What?
Yes.
Okay, then you're an immoral. Then you're immoral as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's your opinion.
Yep, it is.
Very well.
Sorry?
I'd just like to put forth.
Sorry, what?
Very well.
I can't hear you.
But I apologize, Matt.
You apologize for what? For being immoral?
No, for not being audible.
Oh,
Okay.
not being audible. Yeah.
You ought to apologize for not being moral.
Yeah.
Well, I am being moral from my perspective.
Okay, and your perspective is in conflict with mine, and it's in conflict with well-being and what we would consider decent. It's in conflict with what the United Nations has to say about basic human rights. It's in conflict with pretty much everything any decent person thinks about basic human rights, and that is that slavery should never have been considered moral.
Although it's consistent with ISIS. They think slavery's good.
What's that?
Neither you nor the United Nations nor any other human organization on earth has the moral power to decree something wrong.
Okay,
Of course.
so why do you?
I do not. However, the Lord does.
Okay, prove it. Because all I have is your opinion about what God says and that He's the Lord and that He can do this. I don't have any information from this God or Lord.
Well, if you read the Bible...
I've read it,
Yeah.
I've taught it, I've debunked it, I've moved on. Why should I care what the Bible has to say?
Why interrupt me?
Why should I care what the Bible has to say?
I was just getting to that and you interrupted me.
Okay, there's a reason why I did that, and that's because you're making irrelevant arguments. Why do I care what the Bible has to say?
Because if the Bible is true, then what the God commands is in our best interest.
Not necessarily. First of all, you haven't demonstrated that the Bible is true. I asked why I should pay attention to it, and you can't begin that with an if. But also, there's no demonstration that it's in our best interest According to the Bible, everything's happening according to God's plan. We are unworthy. We may or may not be gifted with salvation, but we are not the foundation upon which morality rests or God's goals rest.
And indeed we are.
Okay.
Really?
In any case, you haven't demonstrated that it's true.
The Lord commands us to obey him.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Why is that in our best interest to obey? Is it so that we don't fall under his wrath?
Go to heaven.
So that we don't fall under his wrath, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So you're saying that the God of the universe cares about us and we better pay attention, otherwise we'll fall under his wrath.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's an asshole who's immoral. If he exists, and yet you still haven't bothered to demonstrate that he exists or that I should care about his book. He is the mafia boss who's coming around telling us that, hey, that's a really nice soul you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Why don't you pay up your vig?
The Lord's nature is such that he derives pleasure from our suffering, our just suffering, sufficient enough to outweigh that suffering.
And you think that that represents a good moral character?
It maximizes well-being.
I don't see how.
Really?
How does sending me to hell maximize well-being?
Because he gains glory greater than your suffering.
Are you sure you're not worshiping Cthulhu?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I don't believe you're for real. I don't believe your entire shtick or the way you're talking or the way you're arguing or anything. So we're just going to move on and call it an end to this call. Thanks.